You know, there was a period of time where it looked like high-end makeup effects were going the way of the dodo, being replaced by CGI. And while over the last few years we have seen sort of a resurgence of practical effects within big budget films, it's still largely a dying art, sadly. Which is why today we're going to take a look at some of the craziest and most iconic makeup effects in cinema history. How long did Ron Perlman spend in the chair to become Hellboy? What sort of groundbreaking techniques were invented for the original Planet of the Apes? And what happened to the over 1,800 Hobbit feet that were produced for the Lord of the Rings films? But before we jump into it, this podcast is actually available over on Spotify. Make sure to give us a like, listen, and a follow over there to help support the podcast. Hello everybody, welcome to the Behind the Screen podcast. I'm John Aljets, and with me this week is my good friend, Owen Poole.
How's it going, everybody?
Owen, it's great to have you back.
It's good to be back. It's been a minute talking about movies. We've been still kind of trapped in our homes. Miss talking about movies with you.
Well, but here we are. We are safely distanced from
Very
each
long
other.
table.
Still in person. But this week we're going to be talking about makeup effects, and just, you know, I feel like it's going to devolve into special effects in general, because when you're talking about practical versus digital effects, it's really easy to just fall into special effects in general. But we will be looking at it through the lens of actor transformations, as it were. You know, horror films do it a lot. Before the podcast, we were talking about, you know, like Tom Hanks with Castaway, things like that.
Christian Bale's entire career.
He does some crazy body transformations. But then you also have the digital transformations. You know, you've got Benedict Cumberbatch being a dragon in The Hobbit. Zoe Saldana on her continuing quest to be an alien of every color.
She's working her way through pretty fast.
She's been blue and green so far, so she's got to knock off like red, pink. Like, are we just going primary colors? Are we going secondary colors? Like, does she need to be a cyan alien at some point? Also, throughout the episode, I'm going to be checking in with Mr. Ben Kendrick. He's one of the bigwigs over there at ScreenRant.com. I got the opportunity to speak with him via Skype about some of the things we're going to be discussing today, and just got his thoughts on it. So with all that out of the way, let's jump into some practicals, shall we? So, I mentioned in that little spot there, horror films. You know, horror, I feel like, is a place where practical effects will always sort of rule the roost, at least good horror films. Oh, and what is probably, like, within the realm of horror, what is the first, like, maybe special effect that immediately jumps to mind for you?
Well, the horror movie that messed me up the most as a kid was Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yes. I still can't watch those. Like, I'm a fan, but I'll sit there and I'll be watching them through my fingers.
Well, it's not necessarily what shows up on screen for me. It's just the concept of, like, you go to sleep and something's going to murder you in your dreams. It's a very just frightening premise. But having the visually frightening character to go with it, it wouldn't have been as iconic without the Freddy Krueger character and how he looks.
Yeah, Robert Englund, his work as Freddy Krueger is amazing. He definitely, like, just embodies that character completely. And the makeup effects on him were, I mean, like, even to this day, they still completely hold up, though, like, weird burn effects. Sure, like, we know these days that that's not what a burn victim actually looks like.
It's okay.
A Freddy Krueger today would probably look closer to how Harvey Dent looked in
The Dark Knight.
In The Dark Knight, which that's an example of digital makeup effects. Still looked great. Still holds up. And that is the one place that I'm going to give the Nightmare on Elm Street remake some credit, is that film, the Freddy Krueger, he looks like a burn victim a little bit. Although he kind of looks like a realistic burn victim melded with the old Freddy Krueger look. But
yeah, it's good that they at least managed to do that properly. I know neither of us are big fans of that remake, but at least they got the look right. And speaking of looks to horror films, one thing I feel like we have to bring up is the sort of body horror subgenre. And I feel like the one that most people are most familiar with is The Fly.
The Fly, yes. Which actually, so throughout this episode, I'm gonna be talking with Mr. Ben Kendrick, publisher for the .com side of Screen Rant, the actual website. He actually had quite a bit to say about The Fly.
I think one of the first examples of practical effects that like horrified me as a child was The Fly. Like that transition and the way that practical effects were applied there definitely sold that transformation to me in a way that like I wouldn't have expected as as like a kid, not realizing that this was like like an actual like cosmetic makeup and stuff that were being put on an actor to achieve a certain result. Looking back on that now, I don't know that I would necessarily have, obviously as an adult, I don't know how an adult seeing that film at the time would have received that, like whether or not they would have felt the same way as I did as a kid, sort of marveling at the magic that, this movie had done through practical effects. But I still look at it as kind of probably one of my favorite uses of practical effects. I know you were talking a bit about like The Thing and some things like that, like the chest burster maybe in in Alien or something. It's like obviously a little bit more of a special effect, but I know that at the time that seeing that interaction between an actor and what looked like an alien monster to me was impressive, and that's something that these days would just be shot as a digital effect. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure now like The Fly would look much more realistic in some ways, right? It would be a much more gradual transition, and it would be probably more photorealistic. But in some ways, like I don't know if it would be as horrifying to me as when I go back and I re-watch that now, just because there is an attention to detail there in terms of the way that the actor is integrated, and also kind of the fact that they're having to work around a physical model, and in some ways the simplicity of practical effects sometimes, I think, to me, it sort of forced filmmakers to have to really sell it. And that left them in maybe, at least in something like The Fly, it being a little bit more human than the tendency would be with digital effects now. I feel like that character would be very different. It would be bigger and it would be grosser, and it would have, like massive wings or something like that, as opposed to sort of this, this sort of disgusting, fleshy looking thing. I think about, the transformation of something like the lizard in The Amazing Spider-Man, like that is such a generic looking thing compared to sort of how horrific The Fly looked. And they're obviously, one's a horror movie and one's a superhero movie, but I tend to think that like the fact that they had to work around those actors meant they kind of delivered a more unique take than we see sometimes when CGI is applied.
So yeah, like he brings up an interesting point of like, if The Fly was made today, it would probably be done with digital effects, and it would probably, like, on the whole, would probably look better, but would it have that visceral feeling to it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's obviously, you'd have to see it to make that judgment, but the thing about the body horror genre is that the more real you can make it look and feel, the more effective it is.
Yeah.
And that was kind of past David Cronenberg's whole jam.
Pretty much.
So much so that Rick and Morty had the Cronenberg world joke that everyone was Cronenberging.
Who haphazardly, mixed a bunch of nonsense together and created a bunch of Cronenbergs?
And if you look at the original The Thing, some really just gross things that they put in practical effects in that movie.
And trust me, we're going to be getting into The Thing here a little bit later on. I've got plenty of points that I want to talk about with The Thing.
But yeah, I don't think The Fly would be anywhere near as effective if it were all digital, because to me, when you use a practical effect and you do it effectively, it puts it in the real world more, and it doesn't, you sort of almost forget that you're watching a movie.
Yeah, pretty much. It helps with the suspension of disbelief a little bit.
Because as good as digital effects have gotten, they're still easy to identify.
For the most part. Especially like when a movie has sat for a few years, that time, like we almost train ourselves to spot digital effects a little bit better. So like effects that looked really, really good, like in like 2015, nowadays, we can immediately look at it and go, that's a digital effect.
Yeah, but practical effects don't seem to have that effect as much.
Yeah. Like, look at something like Jurassic Park, which Jurassic Park used a blend of digital and animatronics, but the animatronics still to this day look fantastic.
Yeah.
Stan Winston's work that he did on that just looks amazing.
I want filmmakers to challenge themselves with practical effects. Some of my favorite movies, use practical effects. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about Jurassic Park and the dinosaurs being practical as opposed to them, in a lot of cases now being just sort of digital creations. And I go back and I watch a movie like Jurassic Park, and I obviously see, that it's a practical effect as opposed to like a CGI effect. And that practical effect might look a bit less fluid or something. But I still appreciate that they built a giant T-Rex, or that they took time to, put like makeup in The Fly on Jeff Goldblum and try and make him look like a monster, because there's a level of kind of physical, creativity that goes into that I think sometimes is easy to ignore when it comes to the digital paintbrush. But on the opposite side of that, when Planet of the Apes or somebody is doing something really inventive, then I want to see that too.
Practical effects they have this visceral feeling to them that can't be replicated digitally. If, for instance, like let's look at the original Planet of the Apes films. These are films that they straight up broke ground with some of the practical makeup effects that they were able to do. The guy who actually did the makeup effects, his name was John Chambers. He was a medical technician during World War II, and he spent his time during that era building facial prosthetics for like soldiers who had damage done to their face. So when the war was over, he transitioned into doing makeup effects for film, and he was the one who developed the Planet of the Apes makeup effects, which was he developed this new sort of like latex foam sort of build that is pretty mundane and pretty like common these days, but back then nobody was doing. And it allowed for a lot more flexibility in the actors' faces, which nowadays you look back at the original Planet of the Apes and it doesn't look like it's that flexible.
But back in the 60s,
that looked great. And I mean, like, it still looks pretty great, even though these days you look at it and you're like, that's a dude in a mask.
But yeah, and one thing that is interesting about Planet of the Apes is that you sort of get different eras of filmmaking in one franchise, because you've got in the 60s, like you said, to this day it still looks good, but it's not up to like our modern 2020 standards. As much as I really don't like the early 2000s Tim Burton Planet of the Apes remake, they still looked great.
Yeah, and that film used basically the same exact techniques that they used on the old ones, just sort of a modernized version of it. So they were still using the latex foam facial prosthetics, but it was, technology had improved so much that it allowed for a little bit more emoting on the part of like Helen Bonham Carter and all these other actors.
Some will say it was just a fairy tale.
Yeah, I remember when that movie came out.
I was hyped when it was coming out.
Yeah, there's a lot of good marketing for it.
And then I saw it, and I remember I was like 11 when it came out. And so I was like, that was pretty good. But very quickly, as I grew up, I realized nah.
Yeah.
But then, we get the latest series of Planet of the Apes films, which the animals were all digital.
Yeah.
And you have Andy Serkis. He had
the guy who never gets to play himself on screen.
Except for in Marvel movies, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was able to sit there and do the ape effects along with a bunch of other actors who were able to jump in.
And those look great as well.
Oh, yeah.
But, who knows how they're going to look in 2025?
This is true.
There's no way of knowing.
Let's talk about something that's not quite as bombastic. Let's talk about something that's a little bit subtler. Well, maybe not super subtle, but still there. Let's talk about the makeup work that went into turning somebody as just gorgeous as Charlize Theron into a monster.
Literally the title of the movie.
In Monster, yeah.
I haven't really looked into that much behind the scenes on that film in particular, but it was my understanding that a lot of it was a body transformation for her.
Yeah, she gained weight for the role, and
but
she
then they had to
shaved off her eyebrows.
Put her in all kinds of makeup to make her, because if I remember correctly, if you look at a photo of her from the movie and the actual person it's based on, I forgot her name. If you put them side by side, it's a pretty similar look.
Pretty much, yeah. They nailed it. And again, when I look at that movie, I almost have this weird separation in my mind where my brain doesn't seem to be able to process that that's Charlize Theron.
Yeah, it's almost like I had that issue for the longest time with Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, where it's just something about either their look or their performance just almost breaks your brain and doesn't allow you to put those two people together. But yeah, like that's the sort of like practical makeup effects and practical like body transformations that we see pretty regularly, but we might not necessarily like, you know, we tend to give the credit to the actor and their performance and not necessarily the work that has gone in to make them look the way that they need to for that.
I mean, we mentioned Tom Hanks in Castaway.
Yeah, he gained some weight, if I remember correctly, for the beginning part
because he was a little chunky.
Because he was a little chunky. He had a bit of a gut on him, and
he worked a high stress job at FedEx.
I'm not body shaming. like you do you, bruh. Anybody who knows me knows that I'd be the last person to be doing any body shaming over here drinking my Coke. Then he had to lose a bunch of weight before they were able to film the island stuff. If we're talking about just body transformations, you know, can't not talk about Christian Bale. This is a dude who can go from being, you know, a twig in The Machinist to being Batman, and then follow that up by being Dick Cheney. This guy is fluctuating so much weight wise. I remember I was listening to an interview with one of those like celebrity doctors. Somebody asked him like, you know, hey, what about like all these body transformations and stuff that some of these actors go through? And they mentioned Christian Bale. And the doctor was basically just like, I'm willing to bet you that Christian has probably taken about 10 years off of his life doing that, at least. Because like that is not healthy.
No.
In the slightest. Like I can only imagine that dude's metabolism is just got to be just very angry at him.
But I think we'd be remiss to, you know, given the proliferation of superhero movies these days, one of the big makeup effects that I remember, like when you first told me what this topic would be, the first thing that popped in my head was Rebecca Romijn from the original X-Men movies.
Yes. And to a lesser degree, Jennifer Lawrence in the later ones. But Rebecca Romijn, she had to spend countless hours.
According to an interview I read with her, it was 8 to 9 hours to get into makeup when it took 4 makeup artists working together.
I challenge anybody who's listening to this, if you don't think that that's that big of a deal, sit in one spot, not able to do basically anything for like 8 hours.
So standard workday.
But like, no, like because with her doing full body, she can't be like on her phone for like good chunks of it. She can't be like doing other stuff. She's literally just sitting there. And I know that, you know, you hear some stories about some actors going into the chair. Some actors will get into the chair and they'll fall asleep while the makeup's being applied. And like, that's fine. But in some cases you can't do that, you know, because sometimes it's such an intensive process that you're not going to be falling asleep. And I know that with Rebecca Romijn, there were periods of time where she was standing up for hours.
Yeah, because they had to do her entire body.
Yeah, they were applying the effects to her backside while they were doing her front.
Because at least Drax wears pants.
Yeah, at least Drax wears pants.
Mystique does not wear pants.
No. Well, I mean, the Jennifer Lawrence Mystique will occasionally have clothing, in which case, like, you know that they didn't do the rest of Jennifer Lawrence's body for that. And I mean, the makeup looks amazing.
It does. It's one of those things that holds up even almost a decade later.
Yeah, and it's
2 decades later.
And it's very iconic. You know, when nowadays when people think of Mystique, that's the character that pops into mind, not the blue-skinned wearing white clothing character that we got in the comics. It's an amazing example of like the crazy stuff that people would do. Like Ron Perlman doing Hellboy. He was in the chair. I think if I remember correctly reading, by the end of the second film, they had gotten so efficient at the makeup that it was down to like 4 hours in the chair.
What I had read is that it was like a total of 4 hours, but in terms of actual makeup application, it was closer between 2.5 and 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, for Rebecca Romijn for 1 second, just imagine your life where you have your standard like 8-hour workday and then you go to work immediately after that.
Yeah.
So some people do that. That sucks.
It does.
But that was her life for a while, where she has an entire workday and then she has to go on set right after sitting there for 8 hours.
And doing some rather physical acting.
Yes.
On set too.
Speaking of physical acting with her, one of the interesting things that I had read in this interview was that in the original X-Men film, she had contacts for her eye effect. But in the second film, she got to not wear contacts, which made her physical performance a lot easier because she could actually see, because they decided to do her eye effect digitally.
Speaking of sort of mixing digital in with physical, I feel like we would be remiss to not talk about The Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Talking about physical practical effects. There was so much practical work done for The Lord of the Rings that I can't even begin to like try to
they like built an entire medieval city.
Yeah, they did some just insane stuff. All the chainmail work, model. All the orcs and stuff done practically when they were like up close.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
But I want to talk specifically about the Hobbits.
The Hobbits.
Because there was a ton of practical effects that were done just around the Hobbits. Not only do you have the actual like makeup work that was done to the actors, there were about 1,800 fake Hobbit feet made for the Hobbits, because obviously like they aren't just going to have like the actors walking around barefoot with like some hair slapped on their feet.
Yeah, that's
they got to be walking through the New Zealand woods. So they basically made like latex shoes that look like feet that are all hobbitized. They've got really stumpy toes and a lot of hair on their feet.
Yeah.
There were about 1,800 of them. And throughout the course of filming, most of them were destroyed. Obviously, they're basically just latex. But there are also some that are now in like museums and private collections and all these crazy things.
I would like a pair.
I mean, I don't think that I need to own a pair just because this is a little gross. But if somebody was like, hey, do you want to see some Hobbit feet? I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you talk about the Hobbits, you also got to talk about like the different like techniques that were done for filming. Obviously you had
a lot of forced perspective.
Which to me is the interesting thing. Where you have like, Ian McKellen is sitting close to camera while, Elijah Wood is far away from camera. But then you also have like, body doubles who were like, you have body doubles both for the Hobbits, who were, little people. But then you also have body doubles for the humans and dwarves and elves who were big people, like huge. You don't see those as much. Most of the time it's either the little people body doubles or the forced perspective. There was some digital work that was done to make people shorter.
And compositing.
Saw a lot more of that with The Hobbit than you did with The Lord of the Rings, because The Hobbit did a lot more stuff digitally than practically. All right, so now let's bring digital into the discussion a little bit. We talked about it kind of a small amount in that last part, but let's really bring it in now. And we're going to be kind of looking at it and comparing practical versus digital. Let's really start hammering in which one's better. And I feel like a prime, like probably the best sort of head-to-head comparison that you can do is Thing 1982 and The Thing 2011. And the reason why you can do that is obviously like they said that The Thing 2011 is a remake. It's not, it's a prequel, but still like they are comparable enough that these two things butting heads should be an interesting discussion. The Thing 1982 is a landmark staple of body horror.
Yeah, it's one of the best, in my opinion, it's one of the best sci-fi horror films out there.
It is, to me, that is John Carpenter's magnum opus. That is his masterpiece. I mean, you could argue that maybe Halloween was his masterpiece. I'm a big Halloween fan, so I'd probably argue that. But The Thing, by most people, is generally considered his best work. And then 2011's The Thing, which I'm going to throw this out there, and I might get some trouble in the horror community for saying this. I think people have been sleeping on the 2011 Thing. I think it's not that bad.
I mean, I never thought it was bad, but it's just tough when you're going from the original The Thing to this. Like,
it's kind of like how we have had many an argument over whether The Lost World Jurassic Park is a good movie.
Oh yeah.
And we kind of at one point came to the sort of middle ground where we were just sort of like, it mainly suffers from the fact that it's a sequel to Jurassic Park.
Yeah, Jurassic Park's one of my favorite films ever made. And if The Lost World were just taken in a vacuum by itself, pretty good. But when you have to compare it to one of the best films ever,
it's hard to stand up. And The Thing 2011 definitely suffers from that. It doesn't help that. So do you know the story behind the effects of The Thing 2011?
Not really, no.
So when they were shooting that, they actually did all the effects practically. Like all the monster effects and everything, they had practical models there on set. And then during post-production, the studio came in and were like, nah, redo it with CGI. So they basically just went over all the practical effects with CGI. And the film has definitely suffered because of it. And I mean, this is something that Ben actually spoke on quite a bit. So let's see what he had to say.
I do think practical effects force filmmakers to have to be creative and have to be kind of, ingenious in the way that they, shoot something, or the way they conceive of a shot, in a way that often, I would say, like, CGI doesn't sometimes force them to have to apply the same level of creativity. Because just like you're describing here, this is a situation where they shot practical effects because they wanted it to be grounded, and they wanted that challenge, and they wanted to do something different in a world where so many of these monster type movies were, digital effects, and they were just sort of plasticky looking monsters. That was an artistic choice that they were pursuing. And then they just, like you described, painted over that artistic choice with something, because it is easier to ultimately do that. It's easy to just, fix it in post. It's the same kind of, thing that we hear in a lot of different scenarios when it comes to special effects and shots they don't like. But yeah, I don't know, with The Thing, that movie was, it was an interesting scenario just in general, but I would much rather have seen the version of that film that had those practical effects, I think, because that's what they set out to do, and then they second guess themselves.
He's totally right there. They don't necessarily look bad, the visual effects, I mean, but I am curious to see a cut of 2011's The Thing with the original practical effects and see if that would have improved the final product.
Well, do we know why the studio would make such a decision?
I think that they said something along the lines of, like, audiences weren't looking for practical effects, and that it just didn't look realistic enough. Which is funny, because these days now there's a pretty strong push from moviegoers and critics alike to try to move more towards physical, in-camera effects. So it's kind of funny looking back at that time. They were like, no CGI, like, people want CGI.
Yeah, because, if I were a studio executive, the main reason I would push for going digital over practical would be shifting my expenses from the front end production to post-production. So to me, it doesn't make any sense to go in on these practical effects on the front end,
yeah,
and then have them do it over on the back end again. That just seems like you're wasting all your money there.
And like it infuriated the guys who did the practical effects, rightly so. That decision to redo all the effects actually angered the practical effects team so much that those guys went out and they made basically their own Thing movie called Harbinger Down in 2015 and used practical effects to do it. It was a much lower budget film. I haven't seen it. It's on I have this huge long list of films that I have to watch. And it's definitely on there. And I was actually talking with somebody on Twitter about it the other day. So it's kind of been bumped up. I might watch it here pretty quickly. But it was, that just goes to show these people were so dedicated to doing this stuff physically. And then the studio just kind of went, no, we're going to do it this way. And the film suffered for it.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like that's the thing. I feel like as long as everyone working on the film, from the top studio execs to everyone down the chain, we've got to be on the same page, because digital effects can look great, but you have to be having that intention from the get-go.
Yeah.
Like trying to put a coat of digital paint over something that you already made is going to make it look not as good.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I feel like when it's a situation where it's like a franchise that we are so used to seeing the practical effects, to then go digital is jarring. Me and you are big fans of Alien and Aliens.
Yes.
Those are two films that the first two films in that series were all practical with the aliens. They were dudes in rubber suits.
What do you mean they cut the power? How could they cut the power, man? They're animals.
I want you two with trackers checking the corridors. Move!
And I say that, and when I say dude in a rubber suit, it makes you think like, oh, it looks like garbage. Doesn't in the case of those films. But every film after that moved to largely digital with the aliens. And they all sort of didn't end up all that great.
Again, I'm not going to say that the aliens being, or the xenomorphs being digital is what made the films not as good. They're
like Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, and of course all the AVPs and everything like that. They all have a lot of problems.
Yes, many problems.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about making that decision from the get-go, is that when you have a dude in a rubber suit, you're limited by what you're actually able to show on camera. So if you watch the original Alien, which if you haven't, I'd be shocked if you're listening to this podcast if you haven't seen this movie.
Yeah, I feel like if you're the kind of person who's listening to the Screen Rant podcast, you're probably a big fan of movies. You've probably seen Alien.
So if you watch that thing start to finish, you don't see that much of the actual xenomorph, which, in my opinion, people might disagree with me, makes it a much more effective horror film.
Yeah, it's kind of just like, and this was done for different reasons, obviously, but the shark in Jaws, they had this big animatronic shark named Bruce.
All these ideas.
But that animatronic didn't work for like 90% of filming that movie. And so they weren't able to show it because it just looked like garbage.
Yeah.
And it wasn't working right. And honestly, the movie, like, Jaws is so much of a classic and so fantastic of a horror piece because you spend the majority of the film not seeing the shark. It builds to this crescendo where you finally do see it, and it's so much more horrific.
And the thing about watching a horror film is that your own imagination of what this thing actually is, helps increase the tension, make it more frightening. Because when you watch Alien Covenant, what I find not frightening at all is seeing the full body xenomorph in broad daylight, climbing on top of a ship with all these camera moves that aren't even real because it's all digital. But when you have the scene in Alien when Ripley's on the, spoilers for a super old movie,
it's like 41 years
is
old
on the pod ready to escape, and you notice it in the background. You're like, oh God, it's on the thing. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
And having limiting yourself with the cinematography, to me, makes it a better horror film, and that's a reason that practical can be better than digital.
And then like the later films wound up, Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection, for all their faults, there is a combination of practical and digital. There was an actual animatronic alien on the set of Alien 3. And, those moments I think are probably the most effective moments of the entire film. That very iconic shot from Alien 3 of the xenomorph getting right up in Ripley's grill, that was a practical xenomorph, and it looks great. But the shot immediately before it of the xenomorph making its way through the medical facility to get to Ripley just does not look good. Like, even back then, it didn't really look that good.
Well, and it's funny you bring that up because one thing they did in Alien 3 to kind of, because that was in the early 90s.
92.
Digital effects were not, it was still really early, like, technology. And one thing they did to kind of work around that was have a lot of POV shots of the xenomorph as it's running through the tunnels and stuff.
This like fisheye lens.
They do the same thing in Alien Covenant.
They do.
Probably because they know
that the CGI looks bad.
That's the thing. It didn't even look that bad, but the filmmakers know that showing less of the creature is better.
Anybody who knows us knows that we could sit here and complain about Alien Covenant literally all day. If you guys want a 24-hour long podcast of me and Owen complaining about Alien Covenant, leave it down in the comments and we'll get it to you. Because we could do it. Not big fans. But
let's go back quickly to the idea of body transformation.
Yeah.
And how this might be a point in digital's favor. I'm sure all of you have seen the first Captain America, the First Avenger.
Oh, yes.
And Chris Evans' pre-transformation to Captain America looks really good.
And that was done, it was like a combination of practical and digital largely, because there was a skinny guy body double that they then put Chris Evans' face onto.
Well, there are already so many big men fighting this war. Maybe what we need now is a little guy.
Because they would shoot basically every scene with small Chris Evans twice. They would do it with the little body double, and then with big beefcake Chris Evans
that we all know and love.
Which it's really funny seeing stills from scenes where it's like, I know that that's supposed to be pre-Captain America, Steve Rogers, but it's like, it's big, ripped, Chris Evans standing in the place, because they need to be able to capture his performance and then slap that onto the little guy. So that's a good example of compositing, which I was going to ask, like, if you're somebody who vehemently hates digital effects, there are people out there like that. Do you draw the line at compositing?
I would never draw the line of compositing because that is a technique, a filmmaking technique that's been around forever.
And I mean, it was something that was done before digital.
Yeah, because like
they would literally take like 2 pieces of film and like
overlay them, do like matte painting backgrounds.
Yeah, that's all compositing.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, matte painting, that is something that I didn't even think about talking about today. Because matte painting is, for those of you who don't know what matte painting is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's somebody painting in a background to a film. The Star Wars films did it almost constantly.
Yeah.
Basically, anytime that you saw a background in a Star Wars film, odds are it was probably a matte painting. But, you know, compositing is something that is so mundane and common these days.
But I think the thing that's specifically about Captain America, I think is really cool, is that unless your actor really wants to do an extreme body transformation, like Christian Bale loves it at this point.
It's kind of his whole shtick.
But you know, that is really difficult and arduous to do for those actors.
You also can't lose height.
That too.
Yeah,
but just the technique of doing a body transformation in a more digital way, even though it is using an older technique. But I think it's a positive step forward to have your actor, unless they really want to do it, not necessarily have to do this for the role.
Yeah, because it's not healthy.
And another avenue that is more recent now, I think people talked about it a ton in regards to The Irishman.
Oh yeah, de-aging.
To me, this is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Because certain actors, you know, they're not going to be able to play certain roles anymore as they age, but digital de-aging can kind of open up new roles for these actors to play. And I think it's pretty cool personally.
It is pretty cool, but this is actually something that Ben talked about, and he brought up a pretty good point about de-aging actually.
I think in general, I'm kind of a fan of digital makeup when it comes to de-aging or aging actors. In some cases, because aging prosthetics are still just, I think, some of the worst practical makeup effects in general. Like I feel like generally that never looks exactly authentic to me. I'm sure there are examples, but I think it is often done badly. And the digital makeup, at least, it doesn't restrict the actor in the way that maybe those prosthetics kind of do. They can still give the same performance, but you know, they're not having to like fight the prosthetics or you know, kind of overact. They can just focus on their performance. But you know, there's also, you know, The Irishman and things like that got a lot of flack for its use of de-aging actors and everything. So there you have a situation where, you know, you have actors that are trying to act younger, and the digital makeup makes them look younger, but they're walking around like old men. You know, like it's like that kind of stuff is I guess the pitfall of that kind of thing. So for aging actors and kind of representing actors, I do kind of lean towards being, in general, like supportive of digital effects. I don't see that taking away from the creativity as much of the filmmaking process as I do maybe a reliance on CGI effects for creature design or that kind of stuff.
You know, like that's something that you might not have necessarily thought about. You know, the idea that you know, you have somebody like Al Pacino or Robert De Niro who they look really young, but they're moving around and their mannerisms are that of an old person.
I noticed that watching Star Trek Picard a little bit.
Yeah.
There's like a bunch of scenes where it's obvious that it's a body double because, you know, Patrick Stewart's in his 80s, so of course he's going to struggle to run upstairs and stuff.
Yeah, but they just like deep faked his face onto somebody basically.
But yeah, just like de-aging technology as a whole, I think is a cool thing for the future because, you know, The Irishman wouldn't have been possible without it.
I mean, they might have been able to pull it off, but what would that have looked like with, like, you know, having to cast actors to play younger versions of them and having to maybe, you know, like you look at Looper, which I really like Looper.
I enjoy Looper.
Some people don't, but Looper, in case you don't know about this film, it's a movie where Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays a young Bruce Willis. And they put him in like facial prosthetics and makeup and stuff to make him look like a feasibly younger Bruce Willis. And I think they did a great job. Like, I think that he definitely sells it. But there is some like uncanny valley-ness to it. You know, it shows that you can do it. But what would that movie have looked like if they had Bruce Willis playing both roles and they just digitally de-aged Bruce Willis to play the younger character. But there is one other, I kind of put it hand in hand with de-aging because it's sort of like the extreme version of this. And that is bringing back actors who had previously passed away. You know, one example that I brought up while I was talking with Ben was Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really fine, it's a fine line. And I think it's something we end up talking a lot about on the .com side of Screen Rant is like, it's cool that, that Peter Cushing got to have like this little cameo. But if Peter Cushing was to star in a future Star Wars movie, like there was a spinoff of Tarkin or something, that would be a very different. It would leave me in a very different feeling, right? Because you're taking a lot of agency out of the actor, and there would have been choices that actor would have probably made differently than the version that's like de-aging, where it's digital makeup and the person is still alive, and they actually get to create that younger version of themselves or an older version of themselves. In the extreme case, though, yeah, would I want to see Carrie Fisher come back, and like star in a Star Wars spin-off movie? I do think that at some level crosses a line. Having her show up kind of in a cameo or something similar to what we got in Rogue One, even though that cameo was included before she passed, it's like that felt okay because it was honoring the character without really pulling, like adding to their legacy in a way that would maybe change the choices they would have made as an actor.
That right there, that's a really interesting point. Like, a lot of people are very opposed to bringing back actors who have passed away to play roles, which I understand. Like, I'm not going to argue with them on that. But the idea of bringing back an actor to play a character that they've already played because you know basically what the acting choices that they're going to make versus bringing them back to play an all new character, there's definitely a line there that I feel like shouldn't necessarily be crossed.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's going to have to be addressed going forward as this technology becomes more widespread.
Yeah.
Like, you could have fully CGI movies with passed away actors and using their likeness for something. You definitely have to get there's a lot of legal issues that would go into that.
I remember I don't remember what it was for. I think it was like for a whiskey or something. There was a commercial that starred Bruce Lee in like the 2000s. And they digitally brought him back. Nowadays it doesn't look good, but back then it was pretty convincing. And so you're kind of like, there's a line.
Personally, if I were Gareth Edwards directing Rogue One, I would personally probably find an actor who just resembled Peter Cushing and cast him in the role.
I don't know. When I saw that Peter Cushing was going to be in Rogue One, I was very much torn on it. One, because like I'm a fan of Peter Cushing. I really like him in Star Wars. I liked him in the Dracula stuff that he did for the Hammer films. So to me, I was like, okay, it's going to be cool to see Peter Cushing again. But there is that kind of like, but it's not really Peter Cushing.
Yeah, it's to me, it's a thing that your audience just has to accept it. Like, either you have the actor who looks like him, you don't bother with the digital stuff. Because the issue with Rogue One specifically is that it takes place so close to Star Wars: A New Hope. So there's no like time gap to show that characters age or look different.
Yeah.
So I get it. Either way, your audience just has to roll with it. Either they roll with the different actor or they roll with the digital.
One of the major downsides of digital is the fact that it falls apart over time.
Technology improves.
Yeah. And as I said, we almost sort of train ourselves to spot digital almost subconsciously. And then like eventually we, start to spot things that back in the day looked great. It kind of makes me wonder like what, we hold up Thanos as a fantastic example of digital work. I know that Ben had great things to say about Thanos, actually.
You look at kind of the original design of that character, and it was pretty, it was pretty generic and sort of goofy in the first Avengers. He was a big purple CGI looking guy. But by the time you actually applied Josh Brolin into the role, for as much of a sociopath as Thanos was, like, there's a real human element to that character. And that would not have, I don't think, been as effective if he had been a guy in purple prosthetics or something like that. Like, the fact he was big and the fact he looked sort of human, but but was not exactly human is a big part of, I think, what sells the humanity in that performance. You know, I guess I think about the Thing in the original Fantastic Four movie, you know, like that version of the character is kind of beloved, but that was also it was a campy movie in general. Like that version of, you know, the Thing wouldn't, as, you know, a Thanos-ish kind of version of the Thing makeup or whatever for the Avengers. Like, I would love to see that, but I would only love to see it as a alternate reality version of, you know, like I wouldn't have wanted it to replace what we got out of Josh Brolin, I think.
And I feel like Thanos is exactly that. It is a fantastic example of this technology working.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the thing I think about with Thanos versus something like Steppenwolf in the Justice League movie is that you have to do it correctly. That's the thing, because both of those films have gigantic budgets. They have all these teams working on it, but the team working on Avengers obviously put more thought and time into how they were going to do Thanos from the beginning.
Yeah,
because you watch behind the scenes, Josh Brolin has all this makeup on. He has this big rig over his face to actually get the facial movements correct and do all these other things. But when you look at Steppenwolf, I just get the sense that whoever was in charge of visual effects for that movie, like the VFX supervisor on set, they didn't even bother.
And I would be curious though to see an alternate universe where the Avengers, where Thanos was done practically. I don't think it would work, to be honest.
I don't know. It's hard to tell.
It is. I think that it would up the cheese factor, as Ben was saying. So yeah, you know, like now we just kind of have to wonder, what is the future for either of these? What is the future for digital or practical? You know, is digital going to eventually become so good that it's going to overtake practical? Is practical going to become so popular that you're going to see sort of a bit of shunning of digital effects? Or are we going to see, you know, a very effective melding of the two?
So obviously this is a bit of fence sitting. I think it's going to be the best of both worlds because digital techniques have gotten so good. And one thing about digital techniques that we don't always think about is how they improve and like speed up the process of filmmaking and can actually, if you do it correctly, can create amazing effects in a low budget film. One thing we talked about before we started recording was David Fincher. If you've watched a lot of David Fincher's work, you might not know that he is a pioneer of visual effects.
Yeah, because he's using digital effects for everything. And it's just like, even just like small little mundane things. He uses, you know, he takes it into the computer and futzes with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of visual effects shots in Gone Girl. If you haven't seen the show Mindhunters on Netflix, highly suggest you watch that show because it's really good. But also watch the VFX reel for that because you see all these shots and they look like perfectly practical sets.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe 60 to 70% of the set is real. And then they have, you know, green screens on the side. A lot of backgrounds are digital. A lot of, you know, things on the side that aren't really in great detail are all digital.
And I mean, like, and there's also just super mundane, just like digital work in the realm of like camera movements and stuff. You know, you look at some of the things that he's shot and you'll see that he shoots with a lockdown camera in super high resolution with a wide lens so that he can then take it into post and do digital camera movements without having to physically, on the day of shooting, actually move the camera. He does do that as well, but he does a lot of stuff in the end in post. And I think that really comes down from the fact that I think he was like a music video director or something before he really got into...
Yeah, he did a lot of music videos, a lot of commercials.
Which people who work in those fields will know that a lot of times when you're actually filming, you got to be doing stuff as quick as possible. You just got to be moving because you got deadlines.
Yeah.
And so that lends itself to utilizing digital to do a lot of things to kind of make up for the fact that you don't have a ton of time on set.
Yeah, you don't have 40 days worth of night shoots to film Helm's Deep.
No.
When you're doing like a commercial, like you got to get that out there.
You've got like maybe 1 or 2 days to film, and then you've got, you know, maybe a week to edit.
And another film, one of my favorite films ever, Blade Runner 2049, manages to blend the practical and the digital so well. Like there's that sequence where where Kay gets his car shot down.
Yeah.
And there's that like giant rubble pile. There's an actual set of a pile of rubble, but then it's mostly blocked off by a green screen around it, and then all the backgrounds are digitally thrown in.
Yeah, you get those digital matte paintings, like we were talking about earlier. You know, and that's the kind of stuff that I feel like we're going to be seeing that in the future, because there has been so much of a push for more practical effects. You know, you look at the Star Wars trilogies.
Yes.
Say what you will about the prequels, say what you will about the sequels. The prequel trilogy leaned super hard on digital effects, arguably to the detriment of the films.
Take, for example, in Revenge of the Sith, when Obi-Wan has his confrontation with General Grievous, it's just Ewan McGregor in a big room of blue screens. And he tries his best. We all love Ewan McGregor. We all love Obi-Wan. All the prequel memers out there.
This one's for you.
This one's for you.
Hello there.
But having a real set to work with, having someone to act against would have made that sequence so much better, because like there's no actual person as General Grievous in that sequence.
There's like a tennis ball on a stick.
Like that, like here's your, like Ewan, here's your eye line. We're showing you your eye line, like what you're looking at, and that's really it.
But compare that to, for instance, Rey's interaction with Unkar Plutt in The Force Awakens, who was a practical creation that was enhanced with digital effects.
60 portions.
But it was Simon Pegg inside of a suit. Just think about that interaction versus Ewan's interaction with General Grievous. Just think about compare those two. You know, the sequels, not that great. I actually kind of might prefer the prequels, but the sequels have a little bit more believability to their performances because the actors have something to act with.
Yeah, and comparing the way they did the sets. You can't see me doing air quotes. I'm doing air quotes.
It's a digital set
for the sets in the prequels. Most of them are completely digitized. Like there's the scene where Anakin is telling Mace Windu that he thinks Palpatine's the Sith Lord. They're like in like a hangar. They're just chilling on blue screens. When you look at something like Blade Runner, when they're fighting in a rubble pit, there's actual rubble there, but they just did the backgrounds digitally. Yeah. So it's hard to say one is better than the other. Like if they built an entire set, it's about how it's implemented.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to it all. And one thing that I wanted to talk about was like, you know, this whole episode we've been talking about the benefits of doing things practically. We've kind of been gushing over practical, but there are definite downsides to doing things practically. And there are times when you would want to do something digitally. Practical effects can often be almost prohibitively expensive, you know, especially when you're talking about, you know, doing sets, building an actual set can be ridiculously expensive. I don't even want to begin to try to figure out how much it cost to build Helm's Deep. Like that had to have been insane.
And Idaras.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing to think about is, you know, where do you draw the line where it's like, okay, now we're getting to the point where it's just not worth it to do it practically. Let's just do it digitally. But that kind of brings me to a question that I have for you, Owen.
Yeah.
And this is something that I asked Ben as well. I want to know, like, if you were put in a situation where you were given, like, somebody was going to pay for you to make a film. And I feel like this is an okay question to ask because I feel like anybody who talks about film wants to make movies. Either they wanted to or they still do. If you were told, hey, here's some funding to go make a film, but you have to either do it all practically or all digitally, which one would you choose?
Well, it depends a bit on the context of the film. But if I just had, you know, Avengers Endgame level budget, I would probably just go digital because, as we talked about with Thanos, for example, digital effects are getting so good that it almost seems easier. And if I'm going to make an entire film, it would be more efficient. And as long as it looks good, I have the budget to make sure that it's going to look as good as Thanos, for example, then I don't see a super relevant reason to go practical unless that was the look I was going for, or I was just going for a film that would just make more sense to shoot practically. Like if it's, you know, a regular drama and like houses and stuff, I'm not going to make digital houses. But if I'm making a big science fiction film, maybe go all digital. A lot of it depends.
See, so like, would you say that you'd want to try to find a way to do it kind of like in the middle ground if you could?
Yeah, if I could do it in the middle, like to me, the way they did Blade Runner was flawless.
See, that's interesting to me because like you and Ben basically said the same thing, only he chose to go practical.
Oh man, I don't trust myself enough to be the person who is able to shoot the practical movie. So if I could fund somebody to make a movie that was all CGI or all practical effects, I would be tempted at least to do the one that's all practical, just because I want to see what that looks like in this era. And I'm talking about it as though people aren't doing that. I'm aware that there are filmmakers and well-known filmmakers that shoot everything practically. But what I'm talking about when I say that is like, a movie that can contend with something like Jurassic Park or something with practical effects would be incredibly interesting to me. I'm talking about it at a scale that, or a Marvel movie that only has practical effects or something. That would be very interesting. But I'm such a fan of CGI effects. Some of my favorite movies and my favorite movie moments in the last couple decades have been, with digital effects, being sort of at the center of it. So I would be very, I think, tempted to move in that direction, even though, the film geek in me knows that that's a bit of a betrayal of the history of film.
And, personally, I'm kind of with Ben on that. Like, I think that I would go, like, if somebody was like, John, you have to make a film that is either digital or either practical, you're not allowed to do the other thing, I would choose practical, just because it has that visceral sort of realistic feel to it. But in a perfect world, I would like to find that happy middle ground between the two. I feel like that is the safest place to be. But in terms of what is the future for practical, will it ever be usurped by digital? Maybe digital is getting to the point where it's starting to appear so realistic that maybe we might start thinking about phasing out practical effects more and more. But I think that it's so much part of filmmaking that I feel like practical it's going to reach that point, kind of like shooting on actual film, where it's just going to have a feel to it. It's going to have a texture to it that filmmakers aren't going to want to abandon for that reason.
It is important to me, as someone who has spent as much time loving movies and loves some of these movies because of practical effects, that filmmakers do try and continue that tradition where it makes sense and where they could maybe tell a story that is unique. I could see a scenario where in the future some of these artists are going back and saying, I'm going to shoot my entire movie with practical effects, and we're going to do it in a way that no one has ever done it before or something. And, where is the James Cameron of practical effects? Like, I'm still sort of, I guess, waiting to see that maybe. And I would be incredibly excited if that was something we got to see. So many of these films, some of the ones that stand out these days, they stand out because, the entire thing was shot as one take or something, right? Or, it's these revolutionary underwater special effects that Cameron is going to show us in the next Avatar movie. But there is something to be said, I think, if there was a filmmaker that could come and just shoot everything practical and have it stand up as a summer blockbuster movie or something. That would be really interesting. I mean, I do think that there is, the way I sort of see it playing out is sort of the challenge of the filmmaker, right? So it's like, does a filmmaker have a vision for why practical effects would make a difference in their film, as opposed to using something, painting something with a digital effects brush or whatever. So I want to see the filmmakers that want to use practical effects and can deliver an experience that's almost as photorealistic as a digital effect would have been. That is interesting to me as a filmmaker and as someone who spent a lot of time watching movies. If someone could recreate the magic of practical effects that manages to compete with digital effects, I think that's cool. And I think we are desensitized sometimes to CGI effects. Like, there's still a bit of an uncanny valley thing, even in the best effects sometimes. And so I think there's still kind of a nut to crack there on the digital side, that if someone can do something practically and they can do something really innovative with practical effects, then I'm excited to see it. But for sure, some of these effects look really hokey now. And so the improvement of digital effects and the fact that it's not, if you have Arnold Schwarzenegger running around as the Terminator and he's getting shredded, by bullets and everything, and his face is getting messed up, like, it is more immersive now to see the version of him that was in some of these more recent films than looking back at, you know, the original Terminator or something where it looks like they've hollowed out his eyeball or something, as opposed to, you know, the sort of the way that it's more integrated with the digital effect now. But, you know, if Arnold Schwarzenegger came out tomorrow and said the next Terminator movie, it's going to be all practical effects and all of his makeup is going to be real, like, I would be very stoked to see how they were going to do that to the same level that the digital effect has produced.
Well, and one thing that we have to keep in mind when it comes to will digital ever completely replace practical is, yes, digital technology is getting better and better and better and better. But in order for it to theoretically just completely usurp practical, the cost is gonna have to go way down.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's getting cheaper.
It's getting cheaper, but you know, you're not gonna make a completely digital sets because it's gonna look that good because it's gonna cost you so much extra money. So that's why most people will have a set and then accent it, do other little things with digital to make it look better. Surpassed, completely replaced, probably not. Because if we're gonna try to go out and make a movie tomorrow, it's gonna be like 90% practical
Which maybe we should go out and try to make a movie tomorrow.
Maybe we should.
Yeah. What are you doing tomorrow? You working?
I am working.
I don't know. I think that we've, you know, put a dent in the argument of practical versus digital. I feel like we've definitely said our piece. So that sort of leaves us only with really one last thing, and that is, Owen, where can people find you on the internet?
People find me on the internet. They can find me on YouTube under Owen Scott Poole. They can find me on Instagram under Owen Scott _P. Follow me on Twitter at Owen Scott _P. I don't tweet very often. When I do, it's usually about specific sports teams and movies. You can also check out my other guest for this week, Ben Kendrick. Of course, go to ScreenRant.com. He does some work over there. Not as much as he used to, but, you know, because he's kind of moved behind the scenes, but he's over there. You can also follow him on Twitter. He is at Ben Kendrick. So be sure to give him a follow and let him know that that you appreciated the podcast. And if you want to see more of me, I am on YouTube. I am Bender Waffles, BenderWaffles. And you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram under the same name. I'm kind of the opposite of Owen. I don't really post on Instagram. I'm more of a tweeter. So, you know, get out there for my hot takes on, like, you know, why we should have the Dino Crisis series come back and, you know, stuff like that. So be sure to check us out. Before we go, did you know that you can also listen to this podcast over on Spotify? Yeah, you can. Be sure to jump over there, give us a follow, all of that. We'd really appreciate it.
It made it as me and the Fly. We hadn't even been properly introduced.
So guys and gals, what do you think? Are you a fan of practical or do you prefer things digital? If you were making a movie, which one would you go with? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below, and while you're down there, why not consider subscribing to Screen Rant or following us on Spotify? Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there.